Sure. We're not live yet, so no worries. Once I hit transition, we'll be live. Oh, maybe we are. Hi guys, welcome to MROWLIVE. This is Shatara. I am the marketing manager here at Makers Row, and every week we invite leaders in business and in manufacturing to share their stories and their insight to help our audience and our community be more successful with their American-made businesses. So today I am joined by Anna from Mora. Welcome, Anna.
Hi.
So tell me a little bit about your company, Mora, and how you got started.
Right now, we help designers with everything that they need in regards to getting ready for production, going through production, sales and marketing, getting into boutiques, selling online. So we start from the very, very beginning, whether that is, we teach online classes, or they're looking for a mentor in the beginning, or they want to hire a company to take care of all the steps for them, the sourcing, the fittings. We have the ability to kind of just meet the designers where they're at, whether they're in the start or in the middle stages, or they've been in season for 4 to 5 seasons and they need help in getting production more cost effective. So yeah, we do all of that.
So you guys cater to quite a variety of entrepreneurs and designers,
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So Anna's going to be taking your questions if you guys have any help, and it seems like she can take almost anybody's questions. So there's a chat box that is to the right hand side of our live stream. So if you guys have any questions, be sure to leave it in there, and we'll get to learn more about the production process, manufacturing, product development, and if you guys have any questions, we'll answer that at the end. But so Anna, a lot of our audience is just starting, and you said something about you are really focused on educating your audience, your customers and designers, and just walk me through what do you guys have set up for new designers?
Sure. So I just finished, we launched a Cracking the Fashion Business class. And for example, I feel like there's a lot that designers need to do in the beginning so that they can set the foundation to be successful. Being in this industry long enough, I've seen what kind of pitfalls there are for designers and what they can easily get ahead of before it happens. So in the class, we teach budgeting and we teach timeline. We teach, just putting together a business plan and costing. So having an idea of all these things before you jump forward, it empowers you if you know where you're spending your time and your money. And then you can move forward in sourcing the fabrics and working with your pattern maker and know that you're on time and that you're on budget. So doing things like that, like I said, we teach it in those courses, or I do one-on-one mentorship, or we do full launch package where we meet with our clients every week.
So through those classes, what have you found is the thing most designers underestimate?
I would say there's a lot. I would say they underestimate how much time it's going to take.
Okay.
Because they don't necessarily know all the steps that are involved. And if you rush through things like your fittings or checking your sizes, you run the risk of not having a good production.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you're taking all the right steps and giving yourself enough time to be successful. You don't want to, sign up for a trade show and be paying for a booth or hire a photographer for a photo shoot unless you have your samples. There's a lot of steps that go into that. And then as well as budgeting, how much everything is going to cost, and thinking you'll be able to figure it out later, come up with the money when you need to. Yeah. You don't want to put yourself in that position. So just sitting down and being honest around how much money you have and what you're able to spend on, because there are things you can spend a lot of money on or a little bit of money on. Website, photographer, those prices can range. So you want to know how much money that you have to spend so that you can spend it properly.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than getting started and just realizing you ran out of money.
Right.
So that means you've lost even the money you invested.
Exactly. So like I said, the number two, two of the top reasons I see designers not succeed is they've messed up their timeline and they're not launching at the proper time, or they don't have the budget to see themselves all the way through the project.
Yeah, and you mentioned like you can look at the budget as far as like marketing and production and samples. So you would recommend someone look at the full budget from start to launch?
I would.
Right at the beginning.
Because you also have to keep in mind, if you're selling wholesale, you're not necessarily getting the money from those sales until you deliver that production. And true. While you're in that production, you have to be developing your styles for your next season. So if you've dumped 100% of your money into that, you don't have the funds to start developing the season, and that's going to put you behind for next season. So just things like that. You wanna know how to get around them and what you need to do.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into like, I know at Makers Row, we also value a lot of content, a lot of education. We have our academy courses and our blog, which bring a lot of new designers to our website. And, when they feel like they're confident, they're ready to reach out to factories, right? So that can be a leap that may be a little premature for some designers, right? So how do you know you're ready to like reach out to a factory?
I would say you should have at least a tech pack and the swatches of your fabric, and preferably a perfect sample. Because the factories, if you reach out and you just say, hey, do you make the production for jackets? They're going to want to know what kind of jacket, what kind of fabric, how many pieces you're looking to produce, because you need to have all that information so they can answer your questions.
Got you. So what would you recommend if I'm new, right, and I want to start a women's dress line? Right? And I'm just going to message a factory and I'm like, okay, I want it to look like, I don't know, an Ann Taylor dress that I saw in the window, and I want to like a spin off of this. Is that enough for me to be like, oh, let's reach out to a factory? Or what should my next step be once I have an idea?
Preferably, you want to get that tech pack together so that you have the sketch, it has the fabric contents, you want to have the fabric sourced, because some factories do source fabric for you, but generally within the States, domestic, they're asking you to source that fabric for you. Or they're asking you to source that fabric for them. So if you have your fabric sourced and you have this tech pack, and then let's say you have a picture that's something that you like that's close enough, you could reach out for that first interaction of like getting an estimate. But you also want to have an idea around your production. Are you producing 50 or you're going to produce 1,000? Yeah. Because that matters too. Some factories are set up for only large manufacturing, and some are set up for the smaller runs.
So when you go to the factory, are they looking at your retail versus, like, they want to know kind of like what your business go-to-market strategy is a little bit? Should you know that before?
The factory shouldn't have much to do with, you always, if they're asking what your retail price is or your wholesale price, it's not really, it doesn't really have anything to do with the cost that they're giving you. Sometimes they're asking because they want to know how much they can charge you and if you'll be able to afford it. So it's not necessarily anything that has to do with your production. Now, if you're making a t-shirt and you're saying, I want this to retail at $12, they'll right away, no, we can't do that, because that means you need us to do it for something like $3. So you kind of want to get the number for the estimates of what they're giving you and build your cost around it instead of the opposite.
So in a perfect world, I know that iterations, you would do like one iteration and one sample and one fitting. But in a realistic sense, what should our realistic expectation be for like product development and iterations?
It depends on what you're doing. So if you are producing, say, a button-up shirt and it's pretty standard, you could just do that first fitting and then do a sample. But if you're doing anything where the fit is really important, let's say you're making a sports bra for running with women that are large-breasted. Like, you're going to have to do a lot of fittings with that prototype. You're going to have to test the garment. So there's going to be more work involved in getting that perfect sample. Again, too, if you're creating a line for anything that's not a standard size or size run, you're going to have to fit that a lot. Let's say if you're creating a line for women of 60 years or older that are looking to wear activewear. So that's not the standard size chart. So you are going to have to fit women of that size or of that age range in those sizes. So you might have to spend a little bit more time there as well. So you just want to give yourself enough time. I would say plan on at least 3.
3 iterations?
Yeah, to be safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound too terrifying.
Yeah, no.
But from like an idea, like if once a designer gets an idea, from an idea to like launch, how much time do you think someone should anticipate? Because I think the excitement is so like high in the beginning, and it's like, all right, I want to be out in the next few months.
So my first question is, what does launch mean to you?
Okay. So
is that just samples? Is that production? Is that
I'm selling.
You're selling. So are you selling direct to customer, or are you selling wholesale?
My website.
On your website. So that means, to me, that means to launch, not only do you have to have the samples, you have to have the photo shoot, you have to have a inventory to sell online. Whether, even if it's something small, say you're going to do 50 pieces, you still have to have that done.
Yeah.
I would say 3 to 6 months to find your samples.
Okay.
Most of that is in the fabric sourcing. Looking for the right looking for the right fabrics, and you've got to get your labels and your buttons and everything sourced. That generally takes longer than designers maybe think, because you can't just go to a retail store and buy what they have. So the sourcing, you want to make that sample perfect. You want to then take that sample and grade it and do one of every size, because you want to check that. And then you want to do that small production. Again, I'd say 3 to 6 months. So we're looking at, I'd say 9 months. 9 months.
It almost sounds like average. 9 months to a year.
Yeah, 9 months to a year. 9 months to a year for you to have a production and your website and your samples all perfect.
And that's for like a small collection?
Yes.
Okay.
And especially if you're doing it on your own, the first time you're going to have to, there's a lot to learn, and there's, you know, you might make some mistakes. You might be shipping your fabric from overseas, and it takes a lot longer than you thought. So you want to set yourself up so that you are ready to go and that you've done all the proper steps. And like I said, if you're doing it on your own, it can take a little bit longer to learn those steps. When we're working with a designer from start, it would take like 6 to 9 months. But so yeah, it depends on how you're learning your information.
And what would you recommend for learning as you go?
What do you mean?
Like,
specifically?
Say for instance, I've never been to design school. I've never had my own line before, and I want to start. And it's almost like you have to learn through experience, sort of. Or what would you recommend, like, as you kind of have these hurdles for learning as you go?
There's quite a few different ways that you can learn. You can take an internship. You could take a course. Like I said, we have courses, you have courses, just learn everything that you can. And you are gonna learn as you go. If you are forever in the learning stages and you never move forward, you don't want that to prevent you from taking the next steps, because a lot of times what's going on is you're actually just afraid of moving forward, and it's not helping you be productive. So you want to be careful, like take a gut check and see, are you ready to move forward but you're afraid, or are you not ready to move forward because you don't have enough information? I mean, the information's out there and that you can find it. I say as long as you have, your budgeting together and your timeline, and you've got a way to find your resources, that you can go ahead and get started and move forward.
That's really good. That's really insightful, because I do believe a lot of us, we may stay in that like just learning, and we just use that as an excuse, like I'm not ready yet, I don't know enough, and it's that fear of like failing. But that's really good. So if you guys have any questions for Anna, be sure to ask in the comment section in the live chat, or you can text MROWLIVE to 313131, and you can text your questions there, and we'll be answering them live for you in a few minutes. So
you can ask me anything you want.
You guys should ask for some more motivational, inspirational words there.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing too, because it's like you own a company and you're afraid, and you feel like you're all alone, but there is the support out there for you, and you can find groups like Makers Row and the networking events. So just to keep moving forward, take one step at a time, and always have this end goal in mind. Some things I'd like to do, if you have this large goal and it seems overwhelming and you never know how you're going to get there. I mean, I remember when I worked, I had a spare bedroom and I did all my work out of the spare bedroom, but I knew one day I wanted this larger company and to help many designers, and it felt like I'd never be able to get there. I once had someone tell me that one day you'll be able to rent a studio, and I was like, never. I'm going to be working in my bedroom forever. But I always had that larger goal in mind. So when I was doing things, I would stop and say, is this little thing helping me get to that larger goal? Even if that was designing my new website or doing something that didn't seem directly connected, I could just stop and check and say, will this help me get to that larger goal? And if the answer was yes, I kept going. And if the answer was like, well, this is kind of busy work so that I feel like I'm being productive, but it's not necessarily getting me to my goal, I would take a step back and see how I could change my direction. So just keep moving forward, and even watching this right now, like this is a little step that's getting you to that larger goal. So doing little things like this, you will be moving forward. You are right now as you're watching this.
Awesome. So I think also you have a very interesting story, because you have not only been on like the manufacturing consultant side, but you've also been on like the design side. So just give us a little bit of a background of how you transitioned from designer to where you are now.
So I was a buyer, and I learned a lot from the opposite side of the industry. We would do trade shows and pool and magic, and then I also have some sales rep experience. And then I worked at a custom design shop with this woman, Sonia. She was amazing. She had like 50 plus years experience sewing, and she was the one that taught me the fine skills of sewing. Like everything had to be perfect. It was like, what is that, Karate Kid? Where I was like, why am I doing this? And then like it all came together 2 weeks later. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So she was really great. So from there, I started my own collection. But to help myself pay bills, I would do the patterns and the samples for other designers. And I really loved working with the designers and just seeing how excited and happy they were when they would get their first sample. And with all the other experience that I had in the industry, it just kind of organically grew. And I always paid attention to what I was inspired to do and what I wanted to do, and that was working with the designers. So paying attention to that and kind of realizing that that's where I was getting a lot of happiness and gratitude, I just continued, and that's how I built the company here. And even how my office to New York, one of the girls that was working for me quit to move to New York. And I was like, well, you should stay working for me and just source fabric. There's lots of fabric in New York.
Yeah.
And then because we did that equaled our New York office. She found a space because she didn't want to work from home anymore, and that's still the space that we're in today. So
that's great. And then that's a perfect transition to Melissa's question. She said, what is the name of Anna's company? It is not clear. So if you could just repeat what your company is and what you guys do.
Sure. It's called Mora, V as in Victor, MORA.com. And we help, like I said, with production management, manufacturing, sales, coaching, classes. So it's vmora.com.
And Andrea asked, how should I go about purchasing fabric for a small production, 50 to 100? How can I keep my costs low?
Sure. So you want to go to a trade show that has small minimum vendors. The DG Expo is a good one. They have all the vendors at that expo are 500 yards or less that they'll sell you. So you don't want to have to buy 10,000 yards of fabric. It is going to be more expensive to buy these smaller minimums, but it's better than spending all your money on fabric that you don't need. So, making sure that they have sample cuts, that you can get 10 yards of fabric to make a sample, and then what is their minimum on their production order, and that you can order 50 yards or 100 yards. You also, if you're working with a vendor or someone that has a large minimum, you can always ask if they have a cut fee, because maybe they will sell less than their minimum, but you get like a $25 cut fee. So staying in tune with those vendors.
Yeah, and we also have a blog post on how to negotiate minimums. I'll link it in once I get a moment, and then I'll leave that for you, Andrea. But the questions are coming in, so we're going to just go ahead and jump into some more questions. If you guys have any questions, you can text MROWLIVE to 313131, or you can just leave your message in the chat, and we'll be sure to get those. So the next question via text is, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see new designers make when developing a product? what would be the one piece of advice if you could give only one?
If I can only give
To
one.
new designers. Should we wait until the end for the one piece of advice, or should we go ahead and give it to them now?
I would say, so I have one piece of advice for a new designer.
Yeah.
That's it?
If you can just give them one thing, it's almost like your elevator, kind of like inspiration pitch, right? You have your one line, one piece. It's not one line, but you know.
I would say, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it.
We're going to
There's
come back
so
to it at the
much.
end. We're going to come back to it. Okay.
One piece, it's like so important. I can only say one thing.
What are the steps to finding local talents to achieve the best price point?
Local talents?
Yeah. Or maybe we
Like maybe
like local manufacturers, local factories.
Well, it depends on where they are.
Okay.
But I know in Chicago or in New York, Mora does manufacturing tours where we take designers on tours of factories. In LA, they also do manufacturing tours through the FBI. So seeing if there's any tours that you can do, or if there's any listings of pattern makers, sample makers. I mean, obviously Makers Row is a great way to find local talent. Do you guys have your section by city if they wanted to do that?
Yeah, so if you search Makers Row, you can filter it by state.
Oh, perfect.
And you can also filter it by no minimum, low minimums. We have like a list of that too. We also have a really popular small batch list. So if you Google small batch Makers Row, you'll see a list of factories that do low minimums, but I don't know about how that's going to affect your price point. That's a different part of the question. So another question is, I want to start a swimwear line, but don't know where to start to get the first sample. Need guidance.
We do complimentary 20-minute strategy sessions on our website at vmora.com, but you have to find someone that has experience in swimwear for that first pattern, and you have to find the fabric vendors. I know that there are quite a few in New York and in LA. That's where Mora does their production for swimwear. So you can look on the Makers Row site, and I'm sure they have things categorized by swimwear. But again, you'll need those first samples done. And sourcing your fabric, you'll need the swimwear fabric if you're going to have any underwires. I say the first step would be put together your sketches, get those clear, and again, work with your budget so you know, are you doing a high end or are you doing something more moderately priced, but get that information together and then just start reaching out to people like myself, looking on Makers Row, and they can help you with those first steps. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
It does. And I think it's key, definitely, like getting the sketches, knowing what you really want.
Right.
And then we said earlier, kind of like getting good examples of what you need. And sometimes it's just starting and letting factories tell you the truth, and you go back to the drawing boards and you get back to it. So a question came in about factories. So what are red flags to be aware of when trying to find a factory?
I would say you want to pay attention to the communication level that you have with them. If they aren't calling you back, if they don't answer the phone, if you're unable to get a hold of them, if you show up for an appointment and they're not ready to go, you have to pay attention. This is going to be the biggest relationship that you make in your whole career as a designer. Your manufacturer is like your partner. They're going to make sure that your deliveries are on time. They're going to make sure that your production is perfect. It's a big deal. So I would say pay attention to how you communicate, and if you want to work with them, and again, checking in with your intuition and your gut on everything. They should be as clear and as transparent as possible. If you're working with someone domestically, I would definitely go for a factory visit and see the floor and meet whoever you can, but you want to just pay attention. It's like any other hired contractor. You want to pay attention. I would definitely be quoting out more than one factory so that you can see if one is quoting you really high or if one is quoting you really low. That's usually a red flag. If they're quoting really high, it may be they don't have time to work with you. If they're quoting really high, maybe they don't want to work with you. If they're quoting really low, they might not have experience with your type of product and know what's involved, or they're not busy, and that could be a red flag. So it's amazing. Usually the quotes come in pretty close.
So it should be like maybe 3 quotes you should get?
I would say 3, yeah.
Okay. And you said something interesting about factories being a partnership, and it's kind of different than any kind of business that you would hire someone and it's like on your terms, and you're really coming into their domain and really trying to come to an agreement on the vision of the product, right?
Right. And for a new designer, if you're making a small production, the factory doesn't necessarily make that much money off of you for the first season. What they're doing is they're investing in your future. They're investing that your second season, your third season, it's going to be larger, they're going to make more money. So knowing that, it's really like, do they want to work with you? Do you want to work with them? It's kind of like dating and figuring things out. But yeah, it does go both ways. So you want to make sure that you are as prepared as possible. We bring gifts to our manufacturers a lot.
Really?
Like we know
for like a consultation, kind of like a quote, an estimate.
Once we get to know them, like if we've already had the first meeting and we're checking up on our production, we know, do they like Jack Daniels? What kind of liquor do they like? Do they like cookies? Like it works. It's great. So like just being thoughtful and like bringing gifts, or like even baking cookies, or whatever you can do. Just to keep this relationship with your factory strong, because it's so important. You don't want to go in and be like, well, I really didn't like him, but he gave me a good price. Let's do this anyways, because it's not going to work out for you in the long run. So just paying attention to that.
That's an important tip right there to strengthen your factory relationships.
Bring them cookies.
Okay, so Director J&B on YouTube asks, who should and shouldn't be in a factory meeting?
I mean, who should and shouldn't be in the factory meeting? Who's on their team, I guess. Like, I wouldn't bring a large team to meet your factory, because I don't think it's necessary. If you're the designer and this is your company, I would meet with them, maybe with your designer or somebody that, if you don't necessarily have experience with different types of seams or sewing or examples, maybe you bring somebody with that does. Like, we go with our designers on that initial contact, so that if the factories have any questions, we're there to answer them, because the designer's new and they might not necessarily know how they want things finished or know the questions. So we bring somebody that has the expertise to be able to talk to the factory if that isn't you. But I don't really think there's like a need to bring a whole
maybe like one other person.
Yeah.
But like almost like one person that's more business savvy and one that's more like
creative.
And so maybe even the person, like if I came in and I'm not a designer, but I got my tech pack made, should I get my technical designer to come with me? Or is my tech pack enough?
All the information will be in your tech pack.
Okay.
Yeah, how you want it finished, what the seams look like, the swatches, where the labels go, if there's any heat transfers, all of that is in the tech pack.
Gotcha. Okay, Sierra on YouTube asks, how do I grade so that the sizes will be true to fit?
Well, that is a tricky question, because there is not a true to fit. There isn't a size chart that the entire world follows. It's basically, it's all over the place. It depends on who your customer is and who you're selling to, what your competition is selling. If you're doing women's wear, if you're doing young contemporary, if you're doing active wear, if you're doing men's, you want to, I would say, research your competition, and also look into what their size charts are and what you like the fit of, and you can base it off of that. So the grading is, you make this one size in the sample. It's in the middle sizes, so that's like the 4 or 6 or the size medium. So whatever your middle size range is, you want to make that first sample, and then you grade up and you grade down from that first sample once you get that fit perfectly. And you have the grade rules that are pulled from the size chart. You can find a size chart, you can build it off of something similar to what your competition is offering, but something that your customer is used to used to what a large looks like, you want to be based off of that. So I know it's not
it's really off
answer.
of your target customer too, right? Like, so when you get your fit model, you want to make sure it really embodies the customer.
Yep, including height too. Average height for a woman, I think, is 5'6", and men at 5'10". So if you are fitting, you want an average height, unless you're doing petites or if you're doing for talls. But height matters, age matters, and then obviously the measurements matter.
Yeah, and Andrea asked, because it kind of goes the same in line with this, is when is my grading done? Is the factory supposed to do it, or do I do it before my production?
Most factories don't do the grading. You will have this first pattern created by your pattern maker, and excuse me, unless they do digital or they do flat pattern, but then that gets taken to the digitizer. If it's flat pattern, they digitize that pattern, and then they do the grading. And the grading is just done mathematically off of that first size, and then after that they create the marker, and that has one of every size on it, and it's just like a flat piece of paper that goes onto your fabric, so the manufacturer can cut all of your pattern pieces in a cost-effective way on that fabric, and then the factory can sew up the samples for the one of every size. But normally, I mean, there are some factories that do grading, but normally you want to use a pattern grader because it's also something specific. So you want to trust that grader that they know what they're doing.
This is a very common question we get. How can I ensure that the factory won't share my idea with other clients or knock me off? And this is like, once you start in the sampling process and your designs.
Yes. So the non-compete. Factories won't sign them, in my experience. They don't want to sign them. And the reason being is, in order for them to, let's say you're making a woman's dress, in order for them to follow through on that NDA, they would have to blindfold everyone that came into the factory, as well as their seamstresses. So no one could know of your idea, and then if someone else is making a dress, a lot of dresses do have similarities. That's just how it is. So they don't want to take on the responsibility of saying, that dress looks like my dress, it's your fault, because it's really not preventable. So I would say the fear of this happening is way, way larger than it actually happens. None of my factories have ever copied anything. And the worst thing that happens, I mean, you could talk to a factory and say, hey, if you have other designers in here, would you be able to tuck my sample away? But once you hit the market, your design's out there. So that same designer can see your dress on the rack or on your website, so they can get access to it at that point. But I would say, as a designer, it's your job to stay creative and be using your own designs, because that's something, no matter what, no one else can take. And if you stay on top of creating new designs, you're always going to be one step ahead of the designer that's looking to copy people off of the rack or copy other people. But I'd say, for the most part, manufacturers are not in the business to sell product. They're looking to cut, and they're looking to sew. And the fear of things being stolen is, I've never ever experienced it. In all of the 9 years that I've been working, I've never had any designer say, this manufacturer stole my idea.
And wouldn't it be easier? It's easier, I feel like, to make it than sell it anyway, right? So even if something comes out so similar out there in the market, you really have to distinguish yourself based off of your marketing and your branding.
And they'll probably be behind you anyway, even if they were to.
That's so true, yeah.
But, yeah, like
if you have a good idea, I mean, somebody's going to want to take it once they find out.
Right. So once it's on the rack, there's no way of preventing that, so.
I've heard also, like, if it is such a unique thing and it's like, revolutionary, kind of like very innovative, one recommendation someone's told me is you get like pieces made in different factories, like depending on what the item is. So maybe like if you don't want it all assembled, in that one factory because you really feel like there's an opportunity for that idea to be taken and it's such a, rare.
Well, if you've invented something and it's really new, you can get a patent or a patent design, but you have to actually invent something functional. I'm trying to think of some designs that have been patented. It has to be something very specific.
Okay.
You couldn't just say, I have this dress, I want it patented, because they're going to say you did not invent the dress.
Okay.
So that there's design patents, but again, they're harder to, it's a lot of money spent with a lawyer, and then let's say someone does end up knocking you off and it's a larger designer, then you have to take them to court, and do you have the money to do that if it's a big brand?
Yeah. All right, so the next question. Should the company, hold on, I think we hit this one. Should the company that makes your sample ideally be, we didn't talk about this. Should the company that makes your sample be ideally the manufacturer of your product?
Not necessarily. The sample maker isn't always the manufacturer, but you do want to have this manufacturer do a sample before they do the production, even if you've had your sample created. The best way we see production be perfect is if you work really closely with a pattern maker and a sample maker, spending the time in development and fittings and alterations and changes, and then you get that perfect sample, and that's what you bring to the factory, because that's what they're going to replicate. And you'll do a TOP, so a top of production, that's at least one piece before they move into that production. Or like I said, you're going to do that size check run where you're going to do one of every size before you move into production. So no, your factory doesn't have to make your first sample.
Okay, the questions are coming. I'm trying to read them really fast. Someone wants to know your opinion on vertical factories. And what are the pros and cons?
I would say the pros of that would be convenience. Everything is taken care of, everything is done in one place, so there's a lot of convenience, but with that comes price. So you're going to end up paying a little bit more than if you were to piece all this out into different places. But yeah, they're usually well knowledged about what they need to do for you. There's a big team that takes everything into place. So I would say the pluses of that would be convenience, and then the minuses would be that higher cost.
So a very specific question from Rich. He said, what would you suggest to a designer that has had samples and patterns made and found out that the company that did them is shutting down, and your patterns are not correct now and you have to start over? Would Mora be a good fit to assist with that?
Right. So I'm sorry that happened. That's unfortunate. We do what we call a pattern evaluation. So we take your patterns and then we take a look at them and give you what our thoughts are. Like, can we work off of these patterns, or would it be easier and more cost effective to start over? It does happen a lot. I wouldn't be too hard on yourself. You can recover from this. So, at least it's all a learning experience. So again, when I have a designer that's done something like this, and say you didn't pay for an education to do your patterns and your samples on yourself, well, this is your education. A lot of us went to school, like myself, for fashion design. I paid, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if I would have just started a company up front, I would have had more learning
early on, right?
Early on, yeah. So yeah, I feel like you can move on from it and just do a pattern evaluation with someone, and yeah, we can help you.
Do you get a lot of brands that want to be made in America? Martha's asking, does the fabric have to be made in America for the product to be made in America?
No, it doesn't have to be. The fabric doesn't have to be made, but you have to just put on there from imported fabrics. But you still have that made in America label.
It's mostly like the assembly.
Right. Yep. So the assembly is made in America.
Okay, this is a really long question.
Okay.
Here. So I have created my own textile, which I want to incorporate it into my swimwear resort wear. I know it's not easy, but having sketches, budgets, fabrics, and a natural ability to sew and visualize my own pattern, how reasonable am I in thinking I could have a small inventory in 8 months? And how much time should I be putting in daily while maintaining a full-time job that's totally unrelated? A lot of people do, this is almost like creating your side hustle now, so that you can maybe eventually transition. So what would you recommend for her day-to-day, as well as her trajectory of how long it would take overall?
Okay, so there's a lot in this question. I'm going to try and relate to it as much as I can. When I first started my company, I was also working at a restaurant as a server and bartender. And I just I scheduled out my time very, very clearly. What am I doing? When am I doing it? I made sure that I had time to work on my business, or for the ideas. I had time to work in my business, to do the actual patterns and the samples. I also took a hard look at what can I outsource, because I need to be spending time on my business, and if I outsourced some of this, would that give me a more productive schedule?
Yeah.
So I would just be as scheduled as possible with your time, but again, have fun with it. If it becomes something where you're like hating that you're like low energy and all you do is work, I believe that you'll eventually end up self-sabotaging, because your being doesn't want to be doing this. So making sure that it stays fun and productive, and that you're doing what you love. Especially outside having like another job. Right. You want to make sure you're definitely enjoying the process. Yeah. So you said something, I want to write it down. It's so good. You said working on, almost like having these buckets of every day. Am I working on my business? Am I working in my business? And can I outsource? Yeah. So doing those evaluations, would you do that like every week when you do a schedule? I would have like a regular schedule where it was like Mondays I do this. I still do it. Mondays I work with my team. Fridays I do on the business development. Thursdays I do consultations. Yeah. So Wednesdays I teach classes. So I have just like a schedule of like what I work on every day, and I make sure that it's working out. And then my number one is I have to be taking care of me so that I can take care of my business. Yeah. So like even before working on my business, I have to know that I am doing the things that keep me sane. You know, I've got to be at the gym, and I have to be eating healthy, and I have to have social time, because if I let all of that go and I'm just working in my business, it's crazy town. You gotta have balance. And just being even like self-aware and knowing, you know, what works for you, and don't fight against. I got to a point in my business where I didn't have a choice. I was working overnight. I remember driving on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, sewing buttons on a shirt for a designer that I had stayed up all night. So I'm putting my life in danger. Yeah, and sewing and driving. Other people's. And I just got to a point where I was like, if I'm going to work like this, I might as well get a job, because what I'm doing to myself is actually illegal. Like, I am illegally working myself to the core. So it's not going to be like that. I can't continue at this level, and I need to adjust something. And what I realized is, I was like, well, I'm either saying yes to things I should say no for, or I'm not being productive with my time, because I just kept backing myself into these walls. And it was a little bit of both. I was saying I wanted to say yes to everything, and you know, I would put projects off and procrastinate too. So I just had a breakdown where I was like, I can't work like this. I can't let this be my life. So yeah, that's me coming from the other side of the crazy that I did create. So I think that's going to be our last question. Well, actually, we have to go back to the one piece of advice, but we're going to do that in a second. We're going to do rapid fire really quick. So we're going to get to know what is rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you just say the first thing that comes to mind. So maybe like cats or dogs. Okay. You didn't even tell me about this. I thought I did in the beginning, before we started. That's okay. You can't see these, can you? No. Okay, what's your worst fear? That's a big one. Claustrophobic. Okay. Do you have a nickname? Nope. What's your sign? Leo. What's your favorite food? I like all food. Cupcakes. Is that quality? But I gave up sugar, so I don't eat sugar. Okay, favorite movie? I don't have one. No? Favorite color to wear? Black. New Yorker. I know. I wore gray today, though. There's black under there. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Favorite clothing material? Ooh. Wool. Do you have a pet peeve? Yeah, lots. A lot. I can't think of one. No? I would say, like, having to walk slow and, like, take my time. I like to... You like to... hustle. Like, go. I like to go. Yeah. Stripes or polka dots? Stripes. You have a hidden talent? Ooh. Yeah, I have, hidden? I don't know how hidden it is. No. Well, we don't know about it. last year I did a bodybuilding competition. That was fun.
Wow.
So, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu too.
That's awesome. I actually went to, anyways, it's not rapid fire. That's, worst clothing trend.
Worst. A lot of the 80s. I've got a love-hate with anything 80s.
Okay. And my last question is Adidas or Nike?
Nike.
Okay. So thanks so much, Anna. Her company is Mora. We'll leave a link so you guys can have it. But
my advice, yeah.
she wants to leave you with the one piece of advice that she would give a new designer if she just could give you guys one nugget to take away.
I would say all relationships matter. Every time you meet someone, every vendor, every factory, every pattern maker, always be kind and respectful, because you don't know how they can help you out in the future or how they'll come back, circle back into your life. It's a small industry, so if you get a reputation of anything, you don't want that. So all your relationships matter.
Thanks so much. How can people reach out to you?
Anna at vmora.com. So ANNA at vmora.com. Our website, vmora.com. But we do 20-minute strategy sessions, complimentary. You can sign up for that on our website.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys.
That was so fun.
Yeah, I had a really good time, and I learned a lot. So we'll see you guys on our next Makers Row Live.